Time for the papers this morning, and joining us today, assistant editor of The Spectator, Cindy Yu, and political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield. Good morning to you both. Let's start, Cindy, with a little bit of IVF in The Guardian, where they're saying...
it's getting too expensive.
Yes, people having to go abroad for it.
Yeah, so one Greek clinic has seen a 20% increase in Britain, in British clients for that particular clinic. Other places are Turkey or the Czech Republic, where it's just a bit cheaper, even with travel and accommodation costs taken into account, than to get IVF privately in the UK. Now, obviously, you can do it on the NHS, but it's a bit of a postcode lottery in this country, where the criteria, whether or not you have a partner, how old you are, what your weight is, how many cycles you've already gone through, all of that, there are national standards for, but actually the provision depends on where you are, even postcode by postcode, which means that if you miss out on the NHS one, you want to go private, it's probably just cheaper to go to Greece. But that, again, raises its own all sorts of problems.
How expensive is it if you have to pay for it privately in the UK?
Well, so I tried to look this up, and it seemed like there's a massive discrepancy. It also depends on whether or not you need to donate egg, or if you need, how many cycles you need, because if it might succeed on the first round, or it might not for multiple rounds. So then that really racks up, basically. But I think it's somewhere at least £3,000, but it could be much more as well.
Much more, usually, yeah.
I hate to sound controversial. I don't agree with it being on the NHS at all. Don't agree with it. And I know people who've done it on the NHS, and so it's not like I'm not sympathetic to the cause. I just don't think that's what the NHS is there for. When we're tight on money. If we were rolling in cash, fine. But the way we are at the moment, I just don't think the NHS should be paying.
I think it's always been controversial that it's available on the NHS.
Yeah,
people see it in a different way.
It has. But then I guess then you open up the debate as to whether IVF should be the preserve of the well-off, you know, who can afford to go private for
it's
it.
the idea that people say they have a right to have children, a right to try to have children. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it.
But they can be critically desperate to have children.
Yeah.
Oh, well, adopt.
And that has an effect on mental health.
Adopt.
Adopting isn't always easy either.
No, but we have got. There are plenty of children to be adopted, and I think that should be, that should be looked at.
I mean, I agree.
that's me.
I agree.
Kids,
the NHS is in...
No, but that's where you've thought about it in terms of whether or not it's a right, right? I mean,
there are lots of things available. I mean, the argument goes right back down to should the NHS treat somebody who's just broken their leg playing rugby. You could argue that that is... It's, they chose to play a dangerous sport. I mean, that's the trouble. The argument goes all the way down to that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, for lots of couples, I mean, they are, so desperate for children. It's an interesting debate, though. You're right. At a time of finite resources, whether that's done, but I mean, I tend to think it probably is, because it just means so much to these families who unfortunately can't conceive any other way.
It's incredibly emotional, isn't it? I mean, it is literally a primitive, an instinct to have children, to want to pass on your biological genes, and people feel very iffy about adoption in those ways. So it's a very emotive topic. And, Stephen, I don't know. It depends on whether you think you have a right to reproduce.
But then they do that, but then, say, for those people who then have a donor egg or donor sperm, you're not actually passing on any genes, are you? It's just...
No, that's true.
It's effectively somebody else's child that you're...
But then if you carry, then women do have that connection with the children that they do carry. I mean, it's very, very tricky. There's no easy answer to it.
Do let us know what you think. It is a debatable subject. It always has been. Very, very controversial. We'd love to hear from you.
I'm certainly not claiming to be right, so I'm just throwing it out there.
And, of course, it's not the only fertility treatment. So you could, I mean, if you say NHS, the NHS shouldn't be providing IVF, what about other fertility treatments too?
Like what?
Well, like pills and all sorts of different fertility treatments.
Yeah, that's true. Contraception is on the NHS.
Yes, that's true.
Is it? So, who knew?
Big subject.
Who knew?
GBNEWS at GBNews.com. Yes, you opened up quite a debate there.
Point there. Fair point, well made. In the Mail, Kevin, we bounced back from COVID much faster than we thought.
Well, yeah, I mean, we thought that we hadn't at all. I mean, we've been sort of bombarded with negative figures on the economy, that the UK was the sick man of Europe again, that our economy was still smaller than it was pre-pandemic, unlike other European countries. Turns out, according to the ONS, we actually were there by the end of 2021. We'd already grown more quickly, and that they'd got their numbers wrong. And that, in actual fact,
They've got their numbers wrong. That's unforgivable.
Yeah, in actual fact, we're now sort of 1%, 1.6% larger than pre-pandemic levels, which is better than Germany, although just behind France and then Italy. So, understandably, the government are saying, there you are, our plan's working. It turns out that things weren't quite as negative as we'd been led to believe, because the narrative was that Britain, for whatever reason, had struggled to come out of the pandemic and was still struggling. Labour say, we're always saying that the Tories have crashed the economy.
We don't feel any better, though. That's the trouble.
That's the problem for the government, is that it's all about perception, isn't it? If
that means we've got money to be able to solve the crumbling concrete in our schools.
Well, perhaps, although Tory backbenchers would like him to use this bonanza to cut taxes, which he's determined not to do. So that's another one to keep an eye on, I think.
Well, not yet.
Well, not yet.
Bring on the general election.
In time for the general election, they might just find some money down the back of the sofa. Yeah.
Meanwhile, Cindy, in the Times, the strength of public feeling about the plan to get rid of ticket offices on our railway stations, will it actually yield results?
Yeah, well, I mean, the government was running a consultation on this, which has had more than 500,000 responses, which is more than they expected. And it sounds like most of them were negative responses to the ideas, which means that there are basically hundreds of ticket offices proposed to be closing that are actually disputed. And so what the government now has to do is, for anything that's disputed, they have to look at it again. And if there are ones that are not disputed, I think they will still continue to close. But actually what it means is that this whole idea of scrapping ticket offices might be much ado about nothing, because the government is going into this election period. Is it just easier to kick it further into the long grass?
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very much so. We've had quite a lot of response about this, haven't we? Mary says, I know you're talking about rail strikes and things this morning. Can you please give a shout out to Sidcup ticket office staff? I will be bereft if they close this office. The staff are second to none. They bend over backwards to help.
Yeah.
Isn't that nice to hear?
Well, it is, but Craig says, with regard to ticket offices, this is yet again the union's refusal to modernise.
No, this is coming from us, the railway users, though, isn't it? This strength of feeling. Simon in Purley, morning Simon, says, when the ticket offices have shut, everyone will then say, how did that happen? Why didn't someone do something? Well, this is what doing something looks like. I fully support the RMT.
It's such an emotive issue, isn't it? I mean, they throw out the figures that, we don't buy tickets anymore from ticket offices, we buy them online. But it's that personal touch. It's the type of thing that people actually notice. If it closes, you turn up, you're late for a train, you're running for whatever, and you...
Oh, if you need it in an emergency...
then you notice.
Yeah, but you see, like at my local train station, there's 4 or 5 ticket offices and 4 or 5 ticket machines, and people queue for the machines, don't go to the offices. The offices are never used.
Yeah.
They're never used.
But I think it's about being in a pinch, isn't it? It's an emergency.
Yeah.
But also, disabled campaigners have been so persuasive about this. If you're blind, if you're deaf, you need that kind of help.
And they do more than just give you a ticket too, don't they?
Yeah, exactly.
And if you say, I need to get to Newcastle from there and there and there, they'll actually tell you how to get there.
What platform am I should be on?
Yes.
What time is it running?
Especially if you're a tourist, if you're new to the place, or if you're freshly moved to, like, an immigrant or something like that. I do
Can't
think
have
it's
the
very
personal touch
important.
without a person, can you?
Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly. So this is welcome news, I think.
Kevin, I don't know what I make of this. There's new Diana tapes.
Yeah.
It all seems to be falling in line with, obviously, the Al-Fayed news and all the rest.
These have been released by Andrew Morton, so it's some of the tapes that he used for his book.
Well, these were tapes that were sent to him by Diana, because, very secret at the time, she was basically the main source behind his book. And they have now seen the light of day again. I think the top line from them, certainly the Express have absolutely nailed it here, is more bad news for Prince Harry. Because apparently Prince Charles, as he was at the time, told Diana's stepmother, Countess Spencer, that they'd wanted a girl.
I've heard this before, have you?
I've never heard
Oh,
this
yes,
before,
I've
no.
heard that. But
maybe that's part of the reason why Harry feels so bad.
It is said, and we don't know because it's only Diana telling us, I think, from the grave, sadly, that, when he realised that she was having another boy, he was very disappointed. This is Charles. But I hate the idea of Harry reading those headlines.
Well,
That's
absolutely.
all he needs.
It will confirm everything that he already thinks about his family.
But I'd have thought it was just a bit of a joke, maybe.
It could
it was a
be.
bit of an offhand, deadpan, oh, well, we wanted a girl, kind of joke. It
could well
not the
be.
tone in which it was saying
Are
it
not
said.
genuinely unhappy. They just want the baby to be healthy.
Yeah.
Well, that's all they care about.
It's the
They don't
sort of
really
thing you
care.
can imagine Prince Charles saying as a joke.
Exactly,
Princess Diana
exactly.
taking desperately seriously.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
dear.
well,
It's
apparently,
horrible that it's all come up again now.
yeah, but it just shows the enduring fascination that we've got with Princess Diana. I mean, nearly 30 years it will be soon.
Well, yeah, 26 years.
And
on
it gives all the
Thursday it
papers
was.
an excuse to put her face on the
Yeah.
front pages again. Sells
Well, so-
papers.
Still sells papers.
So Diana's brother has actually tried to take, has gone to the courts to prevent these tapes from coming to light. But he actually lost the court case because it was bizarrely decided that the tapes were belonging to Diana's voice coach, not the family. I don't really understand the legal ins and outs. So Diana's surviving brother has failed in trying to keep these tapes secret.
It was because
saying that
Diana,
it's invasive.
Diana
and
had a go-between herself and Andrew Morton, who was, I didn't think he was a
right.
voice
Was that
coach,
the
but he was a friend of some sort.
Yeah.
Settling.
And yeah, maybe he masqueraded to the Kensington Palace staff that that's what he was, a voice
Right.
coach. So he set up the tape recorder and just asked Princess Diana the questions that Andrew Morton had given him to ask.
Right.
It was
That
like
must
a
be
go-between.
why then. Yeah, so the family have lost the case about to keep these quiet. And now they're going to be a new documentary out next year. So all of it will be back out again.
You see, I've had enough of it. I really have had enough of it. It's like dredging over old coals, trying to find more scandal, bits of gossip.
Yeah.
Do we need... It's not healthy for the king, frankly, and it's not healthy for William or Harry. So who's it benefiting, apart from the people selling the story?
Yeah, well, that's what it is.
It's all about money. It's all about money. And now we've got 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Can I ask about, and this is purely selfish, Amber de Botton,
Yeah.
because she...
you don't know Amber, do you?
I do know Amber because she was head of Westminster at Sky News and very, very well thought of. And then she went to ITV and then she went to be Rishi Sunak's director of comms. But she's gone after 10 months.
Yeah, it's not a good sign when you lose such a senior figure from your operation, especially, you're right, less than a year after she took the job and probably just over a year till the next election. You know what I mean? You've got to, it's not great. Now, there were lots of warm words yesterday. She was paying tribute to him. He was paying tribute to her. But it doesn't appear as though she's leaving to go to another job, which in itself is a bit of a sign. And it just suggests that maybe all is not well behind the scenes. There was a bit of a mini shake-up behind the scenes earlier this week.
But it's a
in
job
Number
that
10.
never seems to last long with people.
No, I mean, there was a lot of surprise when she gave up. She had a really good job at ITN and was very highly regarded, very popular amongst colleagues. So it was a surprise when she jumped the fence, as we say, to go into communications. And yeah, for whatever reason, it's sad because I know her as well, and she's really nice.
She's
Amber.
lovely. I just think it's very difficult when you get out of... I mean, it's also a bit in-house, isn't it? But when you sort of go from journalism to that political comms,
It's very
you
difficult.
couldn't go back.
Well, that's
it's a
the thing.
one-way street.
Once you've been, it is difficult to come back from political
But
communications.
it does suggest things are not happy inside Number 10.
Absolutely, and MP's back next week. As I said, things are. The polls are still massive gap between Labour and Conservatives. It's obviously not a terribly happy ship there.
Yeah. So. Oh, well. There you go. Keep an eye on that one. A little bit of inside gossip.
It just means there's a job going, though, doesn't it?
Oh, Kevin. Don't look at me. No. I think it's a bit of a poison chalice, that one.
Look at me.
Yes, I think so.
Cindy, Kevin, it's been really good to see you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.